From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I feel treated as a European and representative of a European institution like the representative of an enemy. Is this the basis for a constructive relationship on the basis of mutual trust? I think no.
Outrage in Europe over the National Security Agency spying on the European Union and European citizens. Meanwhile, the man behind the leaks, Edward Snowden, remains in limbo after he withdraws his request for asylum in Russia, and Ecuador says it made a mistake by helping him leave Hong Kong. We'll speak with Kristen Hrommsen of WikiLeaks and go to Germany for a response to the latest revelations about U.S. spying. Then, a former U.S.-backed dictator is detained.
The very first covert operation of the Reagan era, before the Contras, before Jonas Savimbi, was putting Hissene Habre into power, even though he had a reputation for brutality.
Known as Africa's Pinochet, the former dictator of Chad, Hissene Habre, has been detained in Senegal. We'll speak with attorney Reed Brody of Human Rights Watch, who's worked with victims of Habre's regime since 1999. And we'll talk about two other former U.S.-backed dictators, Jean-Claude Duvalier of Haiti and Efrain Reyes-Mont of Guatemala. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Egypt's military has issued a 48-hour deadline for President Mohamed Morsi to yield to the demands of the Egyptian people amidst mass protests aimed at forcing him from office. The head of Egypt's armed forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, issued the ultimatum Monday.
The armed forces warns everyone, if the demands of the people are not met within the ultimatum given, it will find it mandatory upon itself, in accordance to its historic and national responsibilities, and in respect to the demands of the great Egyptian people, to announce a roadmap and procedures overseen by the military that will include all groups, including the youth who were and still are behind their blessed revolution.
It's unclear exactly what role the military would take or what action it expects from President Morsi before the Wednesday deadline. Morsi has rejected the ultimatum, saying he will pursue his own path to reconciliation. A Morsi aide said the army statement was tantamount to a military coup. The government has seen a number of high-profile resignations as millions have taken to the streets to call for Morsi's exit. The Egypt Independent reports two presidential spokesmen have resigned and says Prime Minister Hisham Kandil has offered his cabinet resignation, but Morsi has yet to accept it. President Obama reportedly called President Morsi Monday night in part to confirm the U.S. still recognizes him as the democratically elected leader of Egypt. In Afghan capital of Kabul, at least 11 people were killed today in a suicide bomb and gun attack on a company supplying the NATO mission in Afghanistan. Kabul's police chief said the dead included 4 Nepali guards, an Afghan guard, and 2 Afghan civilians, as well as 4 insurgents. National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden has issued his first public message since arriving at a Moscow airport more than a week ago. In a statement posted on the WikiLeaks website, Snowden condemned the Obama administration for revoking his passport and pressuring foreign governments to reject his bids for asylum. He compared himself to former NSA official Thomas Drake and U.S. Army Private Bradley Manning, writing, quote, "In the end, the Obama administration is not afraid of whistleblowers like me, Bradley Manning, or Thomas Drake. We're stateless, imprisoned, or powerless. No, the Obama administration is afraid of you. It's afraid of an informed, angry public demanding the constitutional government it was promised, and it should be," he wrote. Snowden added, "I am unbowed in my convictions and impressed by the efforts taken by so many." WikiLeaks says its legal advisor, Sarah Harrison, has submitted asylum petitions on Snowden's behalf to 21 countries, including China, Cuba, India, Brazil, and a number of others in Latin America and Europe. But Snowden has reportedly withdrawn his request for asylum in Russia after President Vladimir Putin said he could only stay there if he stopped leaking information harmful to the United States.
Если он захочет куда-то уехать и кто-то его примет, пожалуйста.
If he wants to go anywhere and someone will accept him, he is welcome. If he wishes to stay here, then we have one condition. He must stop his work aimed at harming our American partners. although it sounds very strange coming from me.
Но именно в силу того, что он чувствует себя правозащитником и борцом...
He positions himself as a fighter for human rights, and he is not going to stop this activity. So he has to choose the country for himself and go to it. When it will happen, I unfortunately do not know. If I knew, I would tell you.
President Putin also dismissed the idea Russia might comply with U.S. requests to extradite Snowden, saying, quote, Russia never hands anybody over anywhere and doesn't intend to do so. Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa repeated Monday Snowden's fate is in Russia's hands. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said he has not received Snowden's asylum application yet, but that Snowden, quote, deserves the world's protection. Poland's foreign minister says he would not recommend granting Snowden's request for asylum. President Obama has continued to face fallout from Edward Snowden's latest revelation to Der Spiegel newspaper about U.S. spying on Europeans. Speaking during his visit to Tanzania, Obama said the U.S. would provide its allies with more information about reports the National Security Agency bugged European Union offices in Washington, New York, and Brussels. The revelations have angered European leaders and threatened to derail trade negotiations. Obama shrugged off the criticism, suggesting such spying is common.
I guarantee you that in European capitals, there are people who are interested in, if not what I had for breakfast, at least what my talking points might be, should I end up meeting with their leaders. That's how intelligence services operate.
We'll have more on Edward Snowden and U.S. spying on Europe with WikiLeaks spokesperson Kristen Thompson and German Green Party politician Malte Spitz after headlines. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper has reportedly admitted making incorrect statements about sweeping National Security Agency spying. At a congressional hearing in March, Clapper was asked whether the NSA collected data on millions of Americans. He replied no. But according to the Washington Post, Clapper sent a letter to the Senate Intelligence Committee last month saying he misunderstood the question. Quote, I have thought long and hard to recreate what went through my mind at the time, he said. My response was clearly erroneous, for which I apologize, he wrote. U.S. government prosecutors have begun wrapping up their case against Army whistleblower Bradley Manning as his court-martial entered its fifth week at Fort Meade, Maryland. On Monday, prosecutors sought to firm up claims Manning aided the enemy by knowingly and maliciously handing over documents that would be used by al-Qaeda. A military judge allowed prosecutors to present a WikiLeaks list of most wanted documents in support of that claim, which could carry a life sentence. Manning said he gave the classified material to WikiLeaks in order to expose the U.S. military's disregard for human life and spark a domestic debate about U.S. foreign policy. Meanwhile, Sunday, more than 1,000 people joined a contingent in support of Bradley Manning at San Francisco's LGBT Pride Parade. Supporters dubbed Manning a community grand marshal after the events board refused to let him be an official grand marshal. The activists danced and marched behind a massive rainbow-colored banner that read, "Pride in our whistleblowers." Human Rights Watch reports border guards in Iraq, Jordan, and Turkey are rejecting tens of thousands of refugees attempting to flee the conflict in Syria. The group says only Lebanon is keeping its border with Syria open, while Syria's other neighbors are either rejecting refugees outright or allowing only a limited number in, leaving many stranded at the border. Turkey's rejected the accusations, saying it's currently hosting more than 200,000 Syrians in refugee camps. The report comes amidst reports of a government siege on the central city of Homs and of this killing of a Syrian Roman Catholic priest by rebels in the north. Thousands of pro-choice advocates descended on the Texas Capitol Monday to protest Republican attempts to revive legislation that would shut down nearly all of the state's abortion clinics and ban abortion 20 weeks after fertilization. Building off momentum from the People's Filibuster, an estimated 5,000 people gathered to cheer Wendy Davis, who stood for roughly 13 hours in a row last week as protesters and lawmakers shut down the bill.
Now, I know a great number of us have felt discouraged about the current state of affairs here. Some of us have felt mad. Today is different, though. Don't you feel it? We feel hope. Opportunity to be inspired by each other's actions in in our democracy. And we've witnessed how much we can accomplish when we reclaim our power and require accountability.
That was Texas State Senator Wendy Davis. Protesters are expected to gather again today as the Texas House Committee takes up the anti-choice bill. The full Texas House and Senate are not expected to meet again until next Tuesday. The interest rate for federally subsidized student loans has doubled after Congress failed to reach a deal to avoid the hike. The interest rate on Stafford loans rose to 6.8% Monday when a temporary freeze expired. Lawmakers still have a chance to reach a deal on student debt before the next school year. Student loan debt in the United States stands at nearly $1 trillion after roughly quadrupling over the past decade. Two top managers at the Vatican bank have resigned amidst a growing financial scandal. The resignation of former bank director Pablo Cipriani and his deputy came just 3 days after a senior Vatican accountant was arrested. The accountant, Monsignor Nunzio Scarano, is accused of conspiring to smuggle $26 million into Italy from Switzerland. Lawyers for a group of Guantanamo prisoners have filed a lawsuit to stop the forced feeding of hunger strikers at the prison, calling it a grotesque practice that violates human rights. The U.S. military has acknowledged 106 of the 166 prisoners are on hunger strike. 44 are being force-fed by tubes forced into their nostrils and then down into their stomachs. Lawyers are particularly concerned the Muslim prisoners might be force-fed during the upcoming holy month of Ramadan in violation of religious practices. More details have emerged on last year's suicide of Guantanamo prisoner Adnan Latif. A military probe has concluded Latif overdosed on antipsychotic medication that he hoarded over a lengthy period until he had enough to end his life. 9 different narcotics were found inside his body. Latif was a Yemeni national who attempted suicide multiple times since his imprisonment over a decade ago. He was at least the 9th foreign prisoner to die at Guantanamo since the United States began jailing foreigners there in 2002. 7 died by suicide. Latif had remained at Guantanamo despite being cleared for release several times. One of Latif's attorneys, David Reams, said, quote, "He was clearly not a security risk, and if he had been released, he would still be alive today." The former U.S.-backed dictator of Chad has been detained in Senegal and could face charges of crimes against humanity more than 20 years after his ouster in a military coup. Hissene Habre ruled Chad from 1982 to 1990 before fleeing to Senegal. He's been accused of overseeing the torture and slaughter of tens of thousands of people from rival ethnic groups. Habre's trial would mark the first time an African leader has faced trial for human rights violations in another African country. A coordinator for the legal team representing his alleged victims spoke on Monday.
There is definitely a feeling of relief, especially when thinking about the thousands of victims who fought for more than 20 years to have the right for their grievances to be heard and will finally see their dreams realized. The day they have been waiting for is finally here.
We'll have more on the case against Hissene Habre with Reed Brody of Human Rights Watch later in the broadcast. Hyatt Hotels and the union Unite Here have reached an agreement to end a 4-year fight that sparked a global boycott of the hotel chain. If ratified by workers, the new contracts would give thousands of employees retroactive wage increases and maintain their health care and pension benefits until 2018. The deal includes a process for hotel workers at a number of locations to vote on unionization. The Hyatt chain was founded by the family of billionaire Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker. Its alleged abuse of workers cast a shadow over Pritzker's nomination, but did not stop her confirmation last week. More than 80 people were arrested during the 9th weekly Moral Monday protests called by the NAACP to protest the agenda of North Carolina's Republican-controlled legislature. A major focus of this week's protest was the loss of unemployment benefits to 70,000 people in North Carolina, which has just gone into effect. North Carolina became the first state in the country to disqualify its residents from the aid. Another 100,000 unemployed in North Carolina are expected to lose benefits in the coming months. In California, transit workers have entered the second day of a strike that's halted Bay Area commuter trains for the first time in 16 years. The strike was called after talks failed to produce an agreement before contracts expired. And the newspaper company Tribune will pay nearly $3 billion to purchase 19 local television stations, giving it one of the largest holdings of local TV affiliates in the country. Tribune, which owns the Los Angeles Times and Chicago Tribune, has been seeking to sell off its newspapers since emerging from bankruptcy in recent months. months. The deal comes just weeks after USA Today publisher Gannett nearly doubled its local TV holdings by purchasing 20 stations. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Mary Matte. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and